Joined now by one half of the Rink Wide duo, Jeff Paterson. He and Andrew Wadden were busy yesterday digesting a pretty game effort from the Vancouver Canucks, at least a comeback effort. If they were in a playoff chase, you'd say they got a point here. And, boy, did the Stars play a whole lot. I realized an overtime game, Jeff, but I saw you tweeting about ice time all night with Paterson, Miller, Hughes, and the big guns.
Yeah, regular season career high for Elias Paterson at 25 minutes and 17 seconds. Season high for JT Miller at 25:58. Third time this year that Miller's been up over 25 minutes, but this is the most that he has played this season as a Vancouver Canuck. And Quinn Hughes was a few seconds shy of his season high at 30 minutes and 11 seconds. And obviously Hughes played a lot for reasons I'm sure that we will get into as we go along here when it comes to defensemen. But also both Anthony Beauvillier and Andrei Kuzmenko played career highs in the regular season action as well. I haven't looked at Beauvillier, but obviously some playoffs, so there may have been an overtime game that required him to play more. But in terms of his NHL career in the regular season, 22 minutes and 45 seconds for him. So that's an awful lot of ice time. And Kuzmenko was a couple of ticks over 22 seconds, and he was going. And boy, for all the tough love that he received from Rick Tocchet a week ago, certainly Kuzmenko has responded to the coaching change. Not that he wasn't performing under Bruce Boudreau, he was, but he has 7 goals now in 11 games under Rick Tocchet. And maybe the surprising thing there, guys, is that they have all come at even strength for Kuzmenko. He hasn't scored a power play goal since the middle of January, a game in Tampa Bay out on that road trip that led to the demise ultimately of Bruce Boudreau. But Kuzmenko's getting it done at even strength, or I suppose last night the second of his 2 came with an extra attacker on the ice. But still, he's not benefiting from any sort of power play push here. He's getting it done 5-on-5 for the most part. And so, a week ago we wondered, could these two coexist? But it seems Tocchet's pretty happy with Kuzmenko right now, and Kuzmenko seems pretty happy with his own production.
For those who are saying, Jeff, boy, Tocchet came in here and immediately talked about how, Miller can't be the player we need him to be at 25 minutes, and that's it. Make it all make sense with regards to the ice time and the workload last night.
Well, they were going. First of all, I think coaches have a pretty good feel of who's going, and certainly his top-end guys. And they were the other night against Philadelphia when you look at who scored, and even with the 2 empty netters from Elias Pettersson. But before that, Beauvillier had a couple. Kuzmenko had also scored in that game. So there's undeniable chemistry with that group, and the Canucks were chasing that game. They were down 2-0. They were down 4-2. It's interesting to me that you're right, because Tocchet came in that introductory press conference when he talked about eating elephants and doing all other stuff. He said, these guys are playing too much. We need more from others. And in the first couple of games, Dakota Joshua was the first guy that really got the new coach bump. Since then, Dakota Joshua has gone ice cold and remarkably quiet. And so what we're seeing, I think, is that the top-end guys, the top line certainly, and then, JT Miller's been productive. He's a point-a-game guy in the 11 games under Tocchet. But there's really this widening gap between the top 6 and the bottom 6 that we didn't even see under Bruce Boudreau, where a lot of the bottom 6 guys weren't terribly productive. But my goodness, Joshua's gone quiet. Vasily Podkolzin, again, I'm having flashbacks of November Vasily Podkolzin. There's just not much there, and he took a couple of big hits last night. Jack Studnicka, the jury's still out on him and what he is and what he can be, but right now the answer is very little to the Vancouver Canucks, and he played I think he was the low ice time man last night, but there's this widening gap. So, you can ride your horses when you have a day off like they do today, and then you go and you play St. Louis, and the Blues are reeling after trading away so many of their best players, but, look ahead. You've got Boston on the weekend and then Dallas. I just don't think that you can ride those top-end guys into the ground the way that he did here. Your bottom guys have to play some, and the problem with a team like Boston is so stacked and deep that they'll exploit. Even if your bottom 6 only get 10 minutes of ice time, the Bruins will pick you apart in those 10 minutes. So, no surprise that Elias Pettersson, and I didn't think it was a great night for him last night, but he still found his way onto the score sheet. But, it wasn't the 5 points that he had against Philadelphia. But Tocchet's talked about process here. Well, part of the process is figuring out what he's got to work with and who he can lean on. And unfortunately, I just don't think that he can afford to lean on those top-end guys a whole lot more than he did last night. We need to figure out, I say we, the collective in Vancouver, the management group, and I think fans too, you got to figure out what you've got in terms of some of those younger guys that Tocchet is supposed to be building up here. And in the here and now, it's just not happening.
It's abundantly clear that the offense is not a problem and has never been for this team. But it does tell you where you have an opportunity to rob from going forward in order to address the still not eaten elephant in the room, and that is the defensive problems. And my goodness, what a fire drill it was at times against a non-offensive team in the Predators. I mean, it's not like you're facing the Colorado Avalanche here. And the Canucks look like they had no answers, in particular, Tyler Myers. It has to be the number one job to find a new home for Tyler Myers in the summer after they pay that $5,000 or $5 million bonus, isn't it?
Yes, and yet saying that, I mean, this league is so heavily scouted. Honestly, like, I just can't imagine there's a general manager out there that thinks, like, that's a player that we want. Although with $1 million left on a $6 million contract, there is probably a team that would be able to fit him in for the final year of the deal. But beyond that, guys, like, he's pushing his mid-30s now. I can't remember if I mentioned this to you or on Rink Wide one time, but like I can't imagine that there's another NHL contract for a player like Tyler Myers beyond this one. Like, with his performance, his defensive play, he's rich beyond his dreams. He's going to be okay. But when you see some of the guys that are being forced to go the PTO route right now, like, if he's going to play beyond the final year of this deal, I would think that it would have to be on a PTO if he wants to continue playing. What's he going to look like a year from now? His hockey sense, the hockey IQ that served him well earlier in his career, it just seems like it's out the window right now. And the decisions, the positioning, I'm still not exactly sure what happened on that fourth Nashville goal where, I mean, he spun around, wiped out, and took forever to gather himself. And you just knew when you saw that happen that the puck was going to wind up in their net. Like, it just felt inevitable on that play. But on the night, on the ice for all four of the Nashville goals, to the point that they didn't play him after the final 8 minutes of the third period or overtime. Like, I think finally the coaching staff had said, like, enough here. Like, we can't continue to play this guy. And this is a $6 million player, no OEL, no Luke Schenn. So he's the veteran presence. He's supposed to be some sort of stabilizing force. And quite honestly, at this point, 11 games in, I would love the opportunity to sit down with Adam Foote and get his thoughts, because Foote was supposed to be brought in to shore up this defense core, to help these guys. Adam Foote is a Stanley Cup champion. He's a retired hockey player, but he's not a miracle worker. And honestly, like, I just don't know what more he's going to be able to do. And you just look at Tyler Myers. Like, we talk about the fact that he's on the ice for all four of the Nashville goals. The Canucks have been outscored 15-5 now at even strength in the 11 games under Rick Tocchet with Tyler Myers on the ice. You know, for old schoolers, he's minus 11 in the 11 games since Tocchet took over. So just digging himself and the hockey club a hole when he's out there on the ice. And the problem is that OEL's not going to be back anytime soon, and Schenn, for all intents and purposes, is gone. So, you know, what do you do moving forward here with Tyler Myers? Like, how much can they afford to play him? And as you pointed out, Blake, those are the Predators without Philip Forsberg and without Ryan Johansson for the second half of the hockey game. It's unfortunate because it sounds like it's going to be fairly serious for Johansson. But, you know, the Predators don't score much. Neither do the Philadelphia Flyers in the last game. But the Bruins do, and the Dallas Stars do. And there are still good opponents. The Toronto Maple Leafs are coming to town here before too long. Like, what happens? How exposed does a player like Tyler Myers get against those teams? So, yeah, look out.
Well, first of all, he needs to get on the same rehabilitation of career program that Luke Schenn was once on.
Yes.
And frankly, that Eric Goodbranson is on as well. We said the same thing about Goodbranson, and here he was years later getting a 4-year deal from Columbus. So those big right shot defensemen, never underestimate that there's a GM out there who may look for him. It's Arizona, right? Like, Arizona's the team that wants the big cap hit and the low money out. You know that Tyler Myers is going to be an Arizona Coyote next year, or
quite possibly
a team like that. But really, it's Arizona that stands alone in terms of,
he'd still be big on the cap next year, but you'd be paying him $1 million to be your sixth defenseman on the right side. I mean, I think teams would probably be able to wrap their heads around that, but
serves two purposes if you're the Coyotes.
Yeah.
Jeff, I know we talked about Podkolzin, but like, a word on his season and where you think he is fitting in with this new management group and this man, and frankly with this team.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I agreed with the idea to send him down to Abbotsford. It wasn't happening for him. He wasn't playing a lot. He wasn't in the lineup every night. Bruce Boudreau was coaching for his survival in the NHL, so I sort of understood the reluctance to continue to play a young guy that really wasn't doing an awful lot. Even when he was in the lineup, there just wasn't a whole lot there for Podkolzin. Send him down to Abbotsford, good environment. He didn't light up Abbotsford, but it did look like he regained some of his confidence. When he came back out of the All-Star break and got the call-up, he scored at Madison Square, so his second game, and I thought, okay, good. This isn't going to take, 6, 8, 10 games for him and have him start to wonder, am I ever going to score in the NHL? He scored in his second game back. Unfortunately, that remains his lone point in this run in the National Hockey League, and what's that? I think that's 8 games now for Podkolzin. So 1 point in 8 games. He made goal scoring look pretty easy. We all marveled at the big shot last year, 14 goals as a rookie. Like, he looked like he was on the path to pushing 20 in his second NHL season. Alas, that isn't going to happen at all. But he's got 1 goal now in his last 24 National Hockey League games. And so all of a sudden, there does have to be some red flags. Instead of being on the receiving end of a big hit from Tanner Jeannot, and look, I kind of thought that was checking from behind. Like, Podkolzin couldn't see him coming, but I want Podkolzin to be the hammer and not the nail. And so if he's not scoring, I want to see him be involved physically and, finish checks and do those types of things. And Rick Tocchet had high praise for him out on the road trip because I do think that there was some real energy there. But I even asked Tocchet after the last game, like, where are you with Podkolzin? And he admitted that he shortened his bench against Philadelphia. Last night, Podkolzin was, I think, under 8 minutes of ice time. So there were some real concerns because this is a top 10 pick, guys. And, Trevor Zegras went 1 pick in front of him. And obviously Zegras is already starting down that path to stardom in Anaheim. But he went before Podkolzin. So I'm not saying that the Canucks missed out on Zegras. But a guy like Matthew Boldy, a couple picks after, and Matt Boldy has turned into an absolute stud for the Minnesota Wild. And so I don't want to write Podkolzin off, but this season's starting to feel like a little bit of a write-off. And with 25 games to go, I do think that this is going to be a challenge for Rick Tocchet. Forget Paterson and forget Hughes. You know what you've got, and they're just going to continue to do what they do. But it is about, you made this coaching change. It's about developing some of these young players, not for the rest of this season, but for the seasons moving forward. And the Canucks need Podkolzin to hit here. And I don't mean physically hit. They need to hit on Podkolzin as a top 10 draft pick. And so, yeah, it's been highly disappointing for him, I would have to imagine, and I would think for the organization too.
Would it surprise you if he's moved by the deadline?
No, because outside of Paterson and Hughes, I can't imagine that there are any truly untouchables. I don't want to give up on him because I like the idea of Podkolzin, and we've talked about the fact, I think he has to be developed into a penalty killer, and I'm a little surprised that he's not getting that opportunity here and now. But over the long haul, I mean, he profiles as a guy that should be good at that, and it's an area, obviously, that they're a complete disaster. And so I'm not fully sure why they haven't tried to integrate him into the penalty kill. But no, I mean, I think for the right price, I suppose, if you felt that you could, one of those lateral swaps for another 20 or 21-year-old that was a high pick, perhaps. But this isn't me suggesting that they should be looking at moving him. But again, I think when you look at where they are in the standings, I think that you have to listen. If people come calling, you at the very least owe it to other teams to have the courtesy of listening to hear what they have to say. And if somebody wants Podkolzin, then, yeah, I mean, if the offer is right, I think that it's something that they would look at because this organization, this management group didn't draft him. They're not tied to him. Maybe they don't have the same vested interest as the last regime did. But that said, top 10 pick, they've hit on Podkolzin, or they've hit on Paterson, they've hit on Hughes. This guy's supposed to be part of what they're trying to put together here, and it's not happening for him right now.